Representative Crenshaw for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. I want to point out, I think, two overarching themes. One is considering the environmental trade-offs between certain forms of energy production based on the material inputs required to create that energy production. So we'll get into that. But regardless of how you answer that question, the reality remains that critical minerals are a necessity for modern life, everything from semiconductors to automobiles to life-saving medical equipment to manufactured goods to cutting-edge military technologies. They all require these critical minerals, and they require that they be mined and processed somewhere. I noticed that my colleagues and radical environmentalist allies love to talk about this utopian future where everything or all the world's energy demand is met by a massive amount of wind and solar farms with a massive build-out of transmission lines and grid-scale batteries that don't really exist yet. But they don't want to talk about in that energy transition is the trade-offs and the massive expansion of mining worldwide that's required to make that happen. Worth noting, just as an example, just a statistical example, data point, an offshore wind plant has 13 times more material resources than a gas-fired plant producing the same amount of energy. That's not an insignificant fact. That's a significant fact. The International Energy Agency's projections show that in 2040, demand for critical minerals like lithium and graphite will increase by 4,200% and 2,500%, respectively. Demand for cobalt and nickel also expected to dramatically increase. And so we have to ask ourselves, what's our plan here? Are we going to import it all from China? I hope that's not our answer. It shouldn't be, especially since we don't really have to. No reasonable person would believe that you should enact policies that actually increase the need for critical minerals while also making it harder to mine them. That's a crazy thing to think, but people think it anyway. We need to be able to build things, and we need our policy to actually reflect that reality. You know, it's one thing to import televisions from South Korea. It's completely different to rely primarily on China for critical minerals that are critical to our national security and our ability to live a modern lifestyle. So we're not striking that balance. It takes 7 to 10 years to permit a new mine here in the U.S. It takes other developed economies like Canada 2 to 3 years. I think that's pretty shameful. I think we can do a lot better. Dr. Foss, I have a question for you, and welcome. It's great to see you, fellow Houstonian. I know we've talked about this before. When you, in your analysis, and when you include all the additional mining, processing, and land use requirements of renewables in addition to the transportation and storage needs for the energy transition to happen, is it really that obvious that that transition has a positive environmental impact?
Mr. Crenshaw, good to see you. We're struggling with that question right now, and from the looks now, based on the data we have, and we don't have much, in fact, it's a substantially larger footprint, and we have to acknowledge that and deal with it. People worry about emissions. In the current state of the world, with the amount of tonnage that we produce, the mining industry with processing and finishing of metals right now constitutes anywhere from 11 to 17% of greenhouse gas emissions, depending on where it's located, what sources of energy it uses, logistics, all of that kind of thing. To enlarge that slice of the pie that I put in my testimony, to grow that, to displace fossil fuel production, will obviously put a lot of pressure on the environmental impacts associated with mining. We need to manage those. We think we can. We can mine responsibly, but the fact of the matter is we have to deal with it.
Yeah, and that's pretty wild that your answer wasn't even, we're not sure. Your answer is it might even be bigger.
We think it actually is. We look at the carbon footprint, our associated capacity worldwide for all of the crude oil that we produce and use every day, crude oil equivalent of natural gas. We can live within that footprint and continue to extract energy and materials for a really long time. And part of it is just the demographics of the industry is different. We have a lot of old mining assets. We have a lot of newer capacity in oil and gas.
I appreciate it. And my limited time to Mr. Stratt. On the NEPA reform, we were all really excited about NEPA reform and perhaps that ability to mine more and do more. How has the Council on Environmental Quality's implementation of those NEPA reforms helped or harmed our ability to build infrastructure and develop critical mineral projects?
I'd say it hasn't helped. I haven't seen any changes so far, and what I've seen is a prioritization of certain development projects over others.
Yeah, I'm out of time. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The chair